With rents rising in nearly every city across the country, renters have been searching high and low for any financial relief they can find. Some of you out there might be considering renting or renting to own a mobile home as an alternative to traditional renting. Today's guest, Jared Prevost, has held a number of real estate roles since 2021. He's managed short, mid, and long-term rentals, helped other investors locate deals, and is about to complete his first fix and flip investment. He's also the co-founder of Tandem Finance, which builds financial tracking software that financial coaches can white label and use for their clients. In one of those previous real estate roles, he managed a park in western Michigan comprised of over 100 mobile homes. Our wide-ranging interview covers not only mobile home parks, but also how they differ from traditional apartment situations. He delves into the challenges faced by mobile home park managers, traditional property managers, and real estate investors. Each of these challenges could potentially help you craft the rent or rent-to-own situation that just might fit your needs. As we consistently point out, helping landlords solve their problems can lead to lower rent for you. Could mobile home parks provide you a path to housing affordability? I'm Justin Pogue, and this is Renter Confidential. Jared, so glad to have you here. We met back at FinCon, and just wanted to kind of touch base and see what's been going on with you since then.
Yeah, man, pleasure. And of course, happy to keep you updated. So, FinCon around that was what, early October?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I've kind of had a lot of transitions since then. Went out and I was under contract on a flip right around then, my first property to flip in St. Petersburg.
congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, I wish I was more stoked about all the profit it was going to bring, but I think we're going to be pretty close to breaking even, which it's tuition paid, I suppose. Um, but yeah, then went out and started my own home buying business based out of Eastern Washington as well. So yeah, definitely some big pivots for me in the past quarter or so.
Yeah, so on that flip, because everybody's all jazzed about, what they see on TV with the flip and did the numbers really work the way they show them on TV, or is that just, Hollywood?
Oh, I mean, the numbers on TV, man, are like it looks like you buy it, it's the reno costs, and then you sell it, and that's it. And the
Uh-huh.
rental costs all in, like the actual, hey, I'm paying for the framing, the paint, redo the kitchen, redo the bath, everything like that. I would say on most flips, especially light ones, a lot of times that's less than half of the total cost.
Mm-hmm.
On the front side, you'll pay closing costs, all
Yeah.
sorts of different taxes, all sorts of different. If you're getting a lender, you'll get thousands of dollars of lender fees. So, like, just to buy the property, I thought I was going to have like $5,000 of closing costs. And I was like, oh, this is pretty conservative. Well, it was 8 grand.
Wow.
On the back end, as the seller, you get to pay for the realtors. You're probably going to pay some seller concessions. You're probably going to be asked to do additional repairs to the house. So, like, all of that is, at least depending on your price point, probably 25 grand.
Mm-hmm.
You got to pay property taxes and insurance and utilities and all this stuff along the way. And stuff usually pops up during the renovation that's a surprise. So,
Yeah.
like for us, we had to replace an entire exterior wall that we really didn't think we were going to have to. So, yeah.
And so it wasn't like termites or something that would have
Oh, it
come
was
up,
termite.
and it was, but it didn't
Yeah,
come up in the initial
no,
inspection.
no, man. We bought it from a wholesaler, so we had to move on it pretty quick, and it was occupied, which I mean, it's a real bummer when somebody's occupying a house you want to buy because they're in there, they're watching you, you're trying to be quick, you're not like you can't be so thorough. But the thing is, termites usually you won't you'll very rarely see the actual damage, but you'll see the droppings from active
Mm-hmm.
termites. Well, come to find out, there was a lot of termite damage in this house, but it had been tented like 3 years earlier. So no
Wow.
active signs whatsoever. But when we went to replace some drywall, it was like, dude, when we demoed the wall, we could just push it over. There was no like break out the sledgehammer. And this
Yeah.
is like an exterior wall with a huge window in it. I don't know how like with one windstorm it could have fallen over. So
Wow.
you
Yeah.
just never know, and you have to factor that in. Which, for me, it's just like I said, tuition paid. Now I understand that it's easy when someone tells you that, but once you actually do it, it's like, oh yeah, wow, stuff does come up.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that, X factor that's in there that pops up and stops you from kind
A
of
hundred
slows
percent,
down your roll.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were working with a partner on that?
Yeah, so I brought in a partner, a good buddy of mine, to basically we split the capital that we needed to get into this deal 50-50. We're pretty
Okay.
close to that. So on the back end, when we sell it, we'll have 60% of the profit, assuming we have profit,
Mm-hmm.
would be like pro rata for capital that's put into the deal, and then 40% of the profit for management, which is where like I'm coming in, managing, picking out all the materials that need to be bought, working
Mm-hmm.
with our GC to schedule, making sure that we're financially planning our capital because we'll have to draw from our lender
Mm-hmm.
once we get X amount done. We need to make sure we have enough money to pay our contractor for a certain part of the work being done. All those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, that's also a good lesson, like actually like budgeting in the value of your labor, which I think
Mhm.
a lot of people who start investing in real estate don't even consider that at
Oh,
all.
the worst thing ever, man, is when I hear people that are like, "Oh, well, if I do the rental myself, that's only like 20 grand." I'm like, "Are you investing to make a profit? Or are you investing to give yourself a temporary job with no benefits for a few months?" Because it sounds pretty terrible to me. Like, if there's no profit, don't do the deal. Like
Hmm.
this whole idea of I'll make it work because I do it myself. It's like, well, you're not building a business. You're kind of giving yourself a bad job.
Yeah, yeah. And you're not comparing it against this is what it would cost for me to have a contractor come in and do that versus what it would cost for me to come in and do that. And really kind of
Mhm.
make an apples to apples comparison and see if it's worth it.
Yeah.
Um, and actually another guy, Anthony Weaver, who was at FinCon as well, he had a flip and he was trying to sell it, and his contractor, just the scheduling wasn't working out and he didn't want to have that extra month of carrying costs.
Yeah.
So he came in and he did some painting and put some knobs on the cabinets and that kind of stuff to get it done and out of the way. So it's just another,
Happens so often.
yeah, yeah, because your schedule is not their schedule.
I know. I'm really fortunate. My GC is a rock star, so that is so far been my biggest saving grace because we bought it a little bit too high, way underestimated the reno, which I can blame at least some of that on my GC, but a lot of that
Hmm.
is on me as well. So, but at the very least, he's on it. We're getting stuff done. It's done the right way, done the cheapest way that we can find how and make it look nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's your brand, your reputation on the line when you sell that house to somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
the last thing
You
you want to do is end up in court trying to defend, this exterior wall that's not sturdy.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many ways that you could cut corners with like cut corners enough for somebody to buy it before realizing like a friend of mine bought a house from a flipper and a year later all the weeds are coming up because they just threw sod over like
Hmm.
it's just like it costs a couple $1,000 more. You probably won't get more money on it. Like we could have cheaped out and not thrown insulation in a few places and it's like, no,
Hmm.
man,
Yeah,
just do it the right way. Law of reciprocity, you do things the right way, it'll come back to you.
yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, like if I'm buying a property, I prefer for it not to be newly painted. Like, don't I want to see everything before you like try and cover it all up. So
Fair
just
enough.
leave it as is and let me see all the warts.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So on my podcast, Renter Confidential, we're kind of focusing on how renters can navigate through this rental market, different opportunities that they may be able to have to save money, and different ways they may be able to respond to the market that and quite frankly, over the past 2 years. It's just gone literally
Yeah.
crazy, um, from the perspective of a renter. Um, and part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you about that is because you've had this experience of managing a mobile home park.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the first person I've ever met who's had that job before. So I wanted
Yeah.
to kind of touch base with you and kind of get a little bit of a sense of what your experience was with that, the type of renters that you had, was your mobile home park typical, and that kind of thing. So let's kind of just start with what your role there was, and go from there.
Yeah, so the backstory on this is this one of the biggest companies in the country, and I'll leave them unnamed because I don't want to drag anyone through the mud. But they were raising crazy amounts of money, celebrity owner, and they're going out and acquiring all these mobile home parks. Well, they bought this one in Michigan, in West Michigan, and seemingly they didn't do a lot of due diligence on it. So you asked, like, is this a typical mobile home park? In some ways it was. It was about like 100 homes on there, very like class D, 1960s, a lot of the mobiles. Some of them must have been newer. The big thing with mobile homes is not so much for renting, but for flipping and buying them. I believe it's 1978. If it's older than that, you can't get financing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever go to buy a mobile home, that's like one of the first things. Hey, do you have your own land on there? And then is it financeable just by
Mm-hmm.
year bill? But what was atypical about this one is that it way back in the day had been a campground. So there was a lot of interesting issues. There are tons of trees everywhere, which grew into the sewage systems,
Mm-hmm.
which caused a lot of backups into homes. Um, the homes were way too close. The homes, like 70-foot long mobile is that's kind of your typical. 60 is pretty short. Well, the roads were so close that the 70-foot mobiles would hang out onto the roads on either side.
Ah.
So yeah, it created a lot of problems with this company was buying distressed parks and then trying to fill vacancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get the value up so they could this is, I mean, the debt market was a lot different, but it was still the play to refinance these things in low debt
Mm-hmm.
back a couple years ago. And yeah, so it was atypical on a lot of the sides that you'd look at it from an investor. If you were a tenant, it was pretty typical, especially in that one of the most popular strategies in mobile home parks themselves, like you don't see a ton of people just renting like a normal renter.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of lease option or seller finance type of situations. So for a listener of yours that's like, hey, I'm a renter, what does this all mean? Well, a lot of times what happens is in a mobile home park, the park will own the land. And what they want is they don't want to have to worry about taking care of the mobile home. They don't want to deal with it. The mobile home doesn't appreciate. So there's no sense in me holding on to it for like a couple $100 of cash flow, maybe. Like it doesn't appreciate. That's where most of the wealth comes from. My rents, are they going to go up that much in a mobile home? I don't know. But if you can sell someone the home and then rent the land, you can jack up land rents because once somebody rents in a mobile home and they've got ownership stake in it, it's extremely difficult for them to leave. Extremely difficult. Um, so for instance, Justin, if you were coming into the mobile home park and I was the manager of this park for like 3 or 4 months, and you said, hey, like I really like this idea where I can own a home and I think I would charge you like $1,500 security deposit
Mm-hmm.
and maybe $600 a month. And after X amount of years, you'd own the home and I'd give you title to it,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd never own the land.
Gotcha.
So what's tough about that and what a lot of people didn't realize, and I saw a lot of people, I mean, I saw the damage of people who had gotten to these situations, 10 years ago, what it looked like now is a lot of these people barely have enough money to make rent. And they're like, doesn't matter. I own the home. I have something of value. Well, they can't really sell the mobile homes very easily at all. it's extremely difficult to sell it because then there's all these park rules, and I, as the manager, would have to approve like you selling it. You have to replace it with another mobile, and like all of these things where you're kind of owning something you would be extremely difficult to sell.
Yeah, yeah, especially without owning the land.
Exactly. And because you don't own the land, like I could say in the house that you're in right now, Justin, I could be like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to charge you $500 extra a month for that, you having that place you're on right now, just because it's on my land. And
Hmm.
what option do you have? Are you going to pick up and move?
Yeah,
Are you, if you don't pay, you get evicted, and then the
right.
home is left behind and it's yours, unquote, but
Yeah. But
not really.
actually, we should probably back up and be clear, like in terms of like mobile
Mhm.
homes, are these like the typical like mobile homes you would see like driving on the road? Are
Mhm.
these like travel trailers, or are they
Yeah.
more like kind of designed to be more like fixed in place structures?
These are your typical mobile homes where like you could put those things on wheels and drive them off, but most of them will be in one place for 30, 40 years. And
Mm-hmm.
they all have the skirting put up beside them. And a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
they'll cut the like trailer hinges or
The hitch
hitches.
part off, so
Yeah,
it'll look
they'll
more
cut
like a
that.
house.
Yeah, so it looks like a house. Theoretically, you could pull them out, but it's also when something's been sitting there for decades, it's like that's pretty theoretical, and it's not like they're using grade A material to build these things.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, so this concept of kind of rent to own or that kind of thing, we kind of talked about a lot of negatives with that. But as far as if you owned a kind of travel trailer or mobile home and then you drove it and parked it on that lot, um, and you were then paying lot rent to kind of store your mobile home there, and then you were
Mhm.
also living there. Um, what does it look like from that kind of perspective?
Yeah, from that kind of perspective, like I think there's a lot less downside, a lot less risk. And a lot of people will do that in RV parks. Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
RV parks, you can stay there for up to 3 months. There's some kind of cutoff where, based on their designation, you can't have people stay more than X amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, like from a mobile home park perspective, if someone called me up and was like, "Hey, do you have any lands available? Like, I want to bring my home in, pay all the setup fees." And usually the city has permits and stuff for electrical hookups, all these different ticky tack operational things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, "Great, that's amazing. Would love to do that." And then you'd have to sign a lease on the land, and it would probably be for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So lands rents, at least in that area, I think was like $350 a month.
Okay.
Um yeah, not bad. They're also tiny lots. So from that perspective, not bad. I will say, well, I think there's a lot of negatives to doing lease options in a mobile home park. There's actually a lot of opportunity, a ton of opportunity for that right now with traditional houses.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually seen it on, like, I've talked to people around the Tampa area that there's a lot of flippers who are flipping houses and they can't get enough money on the sale to pay off the loan. So they can't sell, like they're underwater.
Yeah.
So what options do they have? Well, a lot of times the original lender who wrote them like this short term, hey, I'm going to give you 9 months to fix and flip this thing and sell it, they'll go back to that same lender, say, okay, let's turn this into a DSCR or a debt service coverage ratio loan. Basically, give me a loan based off of how much I can rent the property for so
Mm-hmm.
that like I don't get foreclosed on or have to sink a bunch more money into the
Right.
deal. But what I've seen from a lot of those people is that they have two problems. If you're a flipper who's converting a flip into a DSCR home, one, you have no money.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of your cash that you put into reno because you're going to fund some of it yourself, like you don't have any of it, which really really stings. because liquidity is just the toughest part about real estate. Nobody has cash because it's always in
Yeah.
properties and projects. And the second thing is that because interest rates are high, their DSCR loan is going to be like, they're going to have a tough time making the payments. And so what a flipper is looking at is like, man, if I could somehow get some cash right now and find a renter who's willing to pay more than market rent, like that's a huge plus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're a renter and you're like, hey, I would love to buy a house without having to go through the realtor process and actually spend some time in the house and lock in a price that I can work towards. Well, you could go to these flippers and say, hey, I mean, you can straight up call, like you could do a search on Zillow, write a circle, any flip that looks like it was nicely done, it's been sitting on the market for more than 30 days. Like, hey, would you consider renting this? What if I gave you $10,000 in, X dollars a month, and the price that you want right now, I'll give you 20,000 less than that within the next 3 years, minus my option fee. So like the $10,000 you pay right now gets taken off the future purchase price.
Right.
And that way, when you go to sell, you don't have to pay any, like there's no closing costs. So I'm saving you $30,000 in realtor fees and title fees and all this other stuff. And I'll pay a little bit more in rent. And then boom, look at that. Like you set yourself up for potentially a place to buy in the next 3 years, and you risk the option fee, but like that's a pretty good unique strategy for
Yeah,
what
no,
we're
it's
after right now.
interesting because one of a couple episodes back, I kind of covered this whole concept of, just because the market presents you with an option, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the right choice for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is a strategy where people can like sit back, take a look at what's going on around them, and kind of, it's something that's kind of outside of the norm, that most people would be looking at, and it could be a good option for a lot of people.
Right.
Um, so I do want to touch back on the mobile home park thing, like,
Sure.
because you mentioned like initial setup fees, and are these like in the range of like $1,000, $2,000? Like what kind of fees are we talking about there?
I would think um I'm trying to look back on it. We had when I was managing that park, we were never able to successfully bring in homes because the city was so upset with us
Okay.
with uh, it, not to go into detail, there were a lot of things on both sides that were tough to make happen. So, um, I know to actually bring a home in, you'd have to do all sorts of stuff. So you'd have to either pour slab or gravel, but usually the park is like they're going to be responsible for setting up the pad, right? It's their
Mm-hmm.
land. And then when a home actually gets on, there's a process of, hey, you've got to hook it up to the plumbing.
Right.
You got to hook it up to electrical. You got to hook it up to water. You got to make sure there's a working water meter on there because most parks will charge you back for water consumption. And I would think that most of those fees would probably be covered by the park, but I would say I wouldn't expect those to exceed $2,000.
Okay.
Probably less than that. And probably for security deposit would be 1 month of your land lease.
The land lease fee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And keep in mind, this was like the park I was managing was very, very class D. Like a lot of people in the city just wanted to see that thing get
Go
demolished or
away.
renovated. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, Kind of speaking of which, in terms of like maintenance on the trailer itself, like were the people who live there, was part of your job like pushing them to like maintain the trailer that they had on their lot?
oh, yeah. So when you move into a mobile home park, if it's a properly run park, there's way more legal work renting, like doing the lease to own strategy with a park than there is like just a standard lease on an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So usually what would happen, and keep in mind this is like the lease option, seller finance type of purchase. So we'd have to do the seller finance documents. We would need to do the land lease documents. And then one of the things we would also do is there should be like park rules. Just
Mm-hmm.
everything top to bottom. Like, hey, if an emergency happens, like this is who you call. If you need help, this is who you call. If you need this or that, this is the website where you go to pay rent, or you can pay rent this way, or you can pay rent this way. All those details. Well, some of those will include like, hey, here's the standards for the homes themselves. Like if you're gonna own it, it's almost like an HOA, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can do some things, it's yours, but it's also got to be in compliance with the park rules.
Right.
So you have to have skirting all the way around your home. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so one of the issues with ours is that the company that purchased the park, they were purchasing parks like crazy, and they wanted to have like a standard rule book for all the parks, but it was just low on their priority
Mm.
list. And so we never had a rule book. So it was kind of tough, man, because management was like, yo, why does the park look so bad? And I'm like, well, yes, it looks bad, but also we have no rules or no standards. So like I really don't know what you want me to do. I even made a rule book and I was like, hey, just approve this and I'll hand this out to everybody, and slap citations on people's doors if they don't clean
Uh-huh.
things up after I tell them, don't have piles of trash in your yard, please. Or if there's sewage pooling up around your home, please let me know. Stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that they wanted this blanket standard rules across the entire portfolio because quite frankly, every piece of real estate is different. So there's always going to be like specific rules for each property. And then
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they didn't have any time to devote to that just
It was
compounds the matter.
it was a tough job, man. It was a tough
Yeah,
job.
yeah, yeah. And now we'll take a break for our sponsor, Apartment Search Secrets. This free book removes stress from your apartment search. The link is in the show notes below, and here's the trailer for this amazing free book. That new job you've been looking for finally came through. So you're taking on a new adventure in a brand new city, which all means one thing: packing and the stress it brings. But you can drop all that stress for free with Apartment Search Secrets. With this short ebook at your side, you'll know your value as a renter. You'll know what the internet can't tell you. You'll see landlord problems coming a mile away. And you'll get the best perspective on your rental search. Visit rentalsecrets.net for your free copy today. And we're back. So, did you get an opportunity to see any other mobile home parks in the area? And kind of in terms of, well, actually, let me even back up. Like, what would a quality, well-run mobile home park have looked like?
Mm. Yeah, so that really depends on the state, because like a quality, well-run mobile home park in Florida, for instance, is like a somewhat desirable, like, hey, I could live here for retirement if,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't end up saving up that much over my life. Like it's still pretty nice. Versus the Midwest. The Midwest is very different. So your mobile home parks in Florida, it's gonna be like retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Your mobile home parks in the Midwest is gonna be like, hey, unskilled labor, um, low income folks, like a lot of people had jobs at fast food restaurants and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I can speak to what a well-run place like that would be, and really the way that it would need to work. And I'll try to keep it brief, but you just have everything cleaned up. You'd have a maintenance man who's mowing all the lawn, raking stuff up, having a clean appearance. In the wintertime, stuff gets properly plowed out and iced. A lot of people that live there are disabled too, very physically disabled. So you've got to keep that
Mm-hmm.
in mind. I don't know that you need to be ADA compliant necessarily, but like we had people like they cut back on how much salt they wanted to use. There's some people that were falling and stuff, and it's like these people are like 70 and obese. They're going
Yeah.
to they're going to get hurt. So it's a lot of just the little things like that. And cutting your trees back, having homes be far enough apart, not having, we had a sign in the middle of the driveway that was one of the things the city was upset about because like somebody was drunk one time and because the sign's in the middle of the only entrance to the park, they just ran right into it. It's like, yeah,
Oh.
maybe it doesn't make sense to have a sign on the ground in the middle of the drive. And we actually couldn't even pull new homes in because that sign was in the way. So just
Ah,
like
okay.
not it's like any business, man, just having like being well thought out and having systems for everything, having like you have a lot more documentation with mobile home parks because people stay there for a long time, because title for the homes, if somebody's paying them off over time, they don't get the title until stuff is paid off.
Hmm.
Having a system for that, a lot of people paid off their homes and never got title. Why? Because the park had been sold like 4 times and nobody knew where any of these titles were.
Ah.
So a lot of like very in the weeds stuff like that, or even for instance, like the sewage system, they needed to just go in and have all those cleared out rather than just every single time call up the plumber and be like, hey, root again in the
Mhm.
same spot for the third time. Like, you
S-
know,
In terms of sewer system, was it a septic system or was it actually connected to the city?
um, I'm not sure. I know all of the between all of the homes they were connected, and I think they went out to the city. But like it was the system that was designed for campgrounds and
Not for
just
mobile
not
homes.
really up to par. So from a renter perspective, I think really if you were going in and wanted to see if a park was well run, just like you judge a business, like, hey, is stuff cleaned up? Hey, when they're talking about rent and everything, do they have all their documents put together? Like,
Hmm.
do they have a system for showing homes? Because if a park doesn't have a good system, it's probably not a good place to live. Or if your neighbors have crap all over their yard, it's just like, hey, maybe they're letting anybody in here. Or even
Right.
if they're going to approve you and they do no scanning at all, no
Hmm.
screening, then you have to think to yourself, okay, then that means they're not doing it for anyone else, which maybe not great for having good neighbors.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question as far as like sc screening for who had mobile homes in the park. Like, was there any of that, or was it just you inherited what you inherited and you didn't actually have to look into that any further?
So we had once people are in, especially if they own the home or they're like in a lease option contract, once they're in, they're in. I mean, pending them getting arrested or something. But it'd be very difficult to kick them out. You could still evict people if they didn't make their land lease payments.
Hmm.
But we did screen. We did one of the things the company did do well is they had a good system for advertising the units and funneling all these people for showings and everything. But I just remember, man, I would call like 25 people and push them to, they'd fill out an application and it was like a $50 fee. They'd pay for their own fee to get the screening run, which would be background report, credit check, all these things.
Hmm.
The requirements were fairly low. I think we wanted to see credit score above 600, make sure that they were someone who's safe and everything like that. And it was like maybe 1 out of 10 had a credit score that was high enough.
Hmm.
And then of those people, maybe half of them seemed like they wouldn't endanger other people. Like it was crazy. I was like,
Hmm.
wow, this
Yeah.
really is what class D looks like. It's very difficult to find people.
Yeah. There's a long way between class A and class D.
I know, and it's almost amazing that like, I don't know what happens to people that are below qualifying for class D, but there were plenty of people who it was legitimately like, we cannot qualify you to live here. Like we know
Hmm.
you will not make a single payment. Or the amount of we had to change our system because so many people paid the $50 and then like 3 days later it would bounce.
Mm. Oh, the $50 payment would bounce.
Oh, all the time.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
All the time, man.
So they would, so it was like a check that they had written, and the check would
Yeah,
bounce.
a check, or like they would put in their they get insufficient funds because it'd be like from a bank account or whatever it was.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, and that's why like we only when someone went to go and pay like their down payment for either the home or their first month rent for the land, it's like, yeah, money orders or cashier checks, nothing else, because we need to see
Yeah,
this is actually real.
yeah. And I'm assuming that you were not accepting cash in that situation.
No. No, and one of the biggest problems actually was a lot of the tenants really loved the idea of like many people did not have cell phones. A lot of them did not have internet. So
Mm-hmm.
for this company that was managing parks or across the country, everything was based off of their rent management system. Like we wanted everything online.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously people could not turn on a phone, you know?
Right.
And so they loved the system of dropping money orders into like a mailbox or something outside the office door or the
Mm-hmm.
office. Well, what would happen? You can't do that because if you do that, you're just a prime target for getting robbed. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's literally just money sitting right outside this door, and we would go stop by once a week. They didn't want on-site management. They wanted virtual management. So
Okay.
it's like you can't do that. So people would have to go to Walmart to pay through
Mm-hmm.
some program if they wanted to pay cash, or they would pay online, or like direct deposit from or direct payment from their bank
Oh, wait,
account.
so they would go to Walmart and give Walmart their money, and then Walmart would send you their payment.
Yeah, exactly. I forget
Okay.
what the program is called, but
Okay.
yeah, a lot of people would do that.
Okay. So, how did you even end up in that job?
Well, I didn't have the best mentor. Um, so my first job out of college is working with a mentor, and he probably didn't lead me in the best direction in a few different opportunities, but he was like, "Hey, man, this is gonna be an easy job. You just gotta collect rent. Like you're gonna get in. This company has like a really big name in the
Mm-hmm.
real estate space, very, very well known. Like you're gonna get in, get to impress these people. Like it could lead to more opportunities. And like you don't have to spend that much time doing it. They'll handle it all. Like you just gotta collect the rent, show up once a week." And I was like, at the time, man, I was making like no money.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, this guy got me tied up into a few other situations which were like hurting my pockets pretty bad,
Mm-hmm.
helping him, not helping me. And I was like, dang, man, like, all right, if I can take time away from helping you and do this, and then I will. And so I think they were paying me like it was not good money. It was I think annual like 20,000 or 25,000 or something. Not good money. But I was like, you know what? I'll do it for the networking benefits. I was kind of under this impression. One, I knew it was going to be an opportunity I was going to learn a lot from and not something I was going to do forever.
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought there was going to be a lot of opportunity to make commissions because if I sold homes and there
Mm-hmm.
were, 30, 40 spaces to be filled, something like that. It's like, okay, they were going to pay me like $300 per. It's like, I can sell. And I
Mm-hmm.
did the math and I'm like, all right, well, that's some good potential. uh, they were never able to actually bring in any homes. So I think I sold like two or three.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, also like I just needed the money. Quite frankly, I needed the money and the opportunity was right there. And it was for some of the other businesses that we were working on at the time. It made a lot of sense for me to try to get into these people's world.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really like partially networking, partially I needed the money, partially like it's good to know about these things. Like I know way
Mm-hmm.
more about mobile homes and mobile home parks than a lot of people ever will because I got thrown into the fire and it was a
Right.
hot fire.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, that's how I ended up getting into it. I forgot where we were going about why you'd asked me how I got into that um
Well, part
job.
of it was just giving people some perspective because the average renter has no idea what goes into creating housing, has no idea of what goes into managing housing that's being rented to them. Um,
Mm,
so it provides some asking you how you got into it kind of provides some insight into who you're dealing with as the property manager, especially the person that is the face of the management company that you're seeing.
Right.
Because one of the strategies that we talk about is if you're going to negotiate, typically the first person that you run into has zero negotiating power. So the idea is to give them the information and arm them to go to their manager and make your
Mm.
case. They'll make your case for you, but you have to present that the right way.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it's kind of insight into who you're dealing with, who you're meeting when you're dealing with that initial property manager that you meet, and kind of the amount of turnover that you may be seeing in property management, because a lot of people don't stay in that job very long.
Oh, no way. Yeah. I mean, at our park, we went, it was, I mean, we used to joke about how you could make a TV show out of it because I was friends with some of the contractors. We had one contracting crew that was fixing up existing homes because we
Mm-hmm.
found out while it made more sense to demo the homes because the city wouldn't let us bring in more homes, which was not all their fault, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we were just like, okay, well, if any home is existing, even if you got to tear that thing all the way down to the base of it, we just need to rebuild
Mm-hmm.
because it's way too hard to bring in a new home. So I was friends with some of the contractors. The lady who had managed the park for at least a decade, but maybe longer, and was a longtime resident, and she
Mm-hmm.
knew everything about mobile homes, about the competitors, like about the laws, about the required licenses, everything. She was there, and like we brought in different. I was interim manager for I don't know 3 or 4 months. Then she was manager for a little bit, and like she was in and out. It was so funny, and management didn't like her at all because she couldn't use the internet, but she actually really knew what she was doing. But at the same time, she was too friendly with other renters there because they were like her best friends, you know? She'd
Mm-hmm.
been there for so long. So I think from the renter perspective, like if you were looking at renting in a mobile home park, for one, you've got to understand that like if you're dealing with management, they really want to just find like good quality people they don't have to worry about and get them into the homes.
Mm-hmm.
And like they might even have incentives. Like for me, if I sold a home, I would get X amount of dollars. So like your negotiation power really comes from like the same as if you're buying a house. Like you want to be the easiest buyer someone ever has to deal with. Okay, if you're going to be a renter, be the easiest renter someone ever has to deal with. When they ask you for things, provide everything in abundance and make it extremely clear that like every signal you possibly can that even if they need to take lower rent for you or waive the security deposit or whatever, it's like, hey, I'm zero headache. I'm the easiest renter you're ever going to work with, and you get me in your park, like other people are going to want to move in because I'm going to take care of my place. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. On time payments, all of those things. It's like anything else. People will exchange price for speed, convenience, and performance. Like that is just every single business ever.
It's a good point. It actually dovetails with some of the strategies that I've presented to people for just dealing with, renting a regular apartment. Um, because I mean, everybody likes to hit the easy button, when they
Dude,
can. They can.
the hard button is not a fun one.
No, no. And it as interesting as the easy button is, it's also interesting how often the hard button gets pressed.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
yeah. And I think some people actually press the hard button because they don't know how to do it a different way. Like
Yeah.
nobody's ever sat down. It's kind of like some of the things that we were talking about at FinCon, where it's like you graduate from school and like there's no guidance on negotiation. You had no classes on critical thinking, and you've had no classes on money, and yet this is exactly what you have to deal with when you graduate and you
Mhm.
start your first job, and move out into the real world. And this lack of it,
Yeah.
yeah, and lack of
The school of
information.
hard
And
knocks, the school of hard knocks teaches you a lot of lessons real quick.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the and the School of Hard Knocks, they don't really charge tuition because that will be on top of the cost that you're going to pay already.
You're right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of what's next for you as you sell this flip that you're getting out of and moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good question and something I'm trying to figure out myself because so most of my time has been spent for the last year and a half, ever since I moved to Florida, doing home buying, so wholesaling, um, doing some creative financing stuff with it. The flip, this was the first one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I actually I really enjoy it. It's really satisfying to take something, put together a plan, execute the plan, and get it sold. But it's also like, wow, it's really tough to find a good deal that makes money because you're taking on an incredible amount of risk, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time, a lot of headache. You better be making $40,000. Otherwise, like as a baseline minimum for your
Yeah.
projection, which is something I put in my projections that I want to make 25K. It's like it's my first deal. I
Mm-hmm.
want to get into the game. It's like, no, that is not enough. Take it from
Mm-hmm.
me. You want to make sure you get enough. So I really enjoyed that, but also um for me, it might be a little bit of a shiny object. And I thought I was like, oh, I have enough money to flip. Now I'm like, man, I want to have 100K cash in the bank account before I start flipping because what gets you in a pickle is liquidity all the time. Like it's always a liquidity issue. So I don't know that I'm gonna flip much until I build up my bank account more.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely am going to be rolling out my software for money coaches in it should be around the end of January that we're running our beta tests. And
Mm-hmm.
then soon we'll bring on our first couple of coaches so that they can own their own platform, connected to their domain with their branding and everything
Mm-hmm.
else so their clients can budget and track their finances. So we'll get that rolling really soon. That's been a work in progress for like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
So
pretty.
just to be clear, this is software that someone can use to say budget their finances, monitor any investments that they have, kind of figure out where their expenses are and ways that they can kind of save and conserve money as they move forward through their life.
Yeah, so I like to put it this way. So, like a lot of the money coaches say at FinCon, what do they use with their clients, right, when they're working with them? Typically Google Sheets,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the reason that they're using Google Sheets and not saying, like, hey, if I was your coach, Justin, hey, use YNAB or hey, use Monarch or hey, use Every Dollar. Well, for one, as a coach, that doesn't help my branding. And that's like all you really have is your brand and your identity,
Mm-hmm.
like your philosophy, your specific philosophy that works for your audience. So it's like you kind of throw that out the window. You don't make any money from it except like maybe you get affiliate revenue, which is nice. And I know a lot of coaches that will do that. But the bigger problem, Justin, is like, hey, if I'm the coach and I actually want to be able to provide feedback to my clients, suggest changes, get insight into all of their things, someone's using a platform I don't own, I
Mm-hmm.
can't access it. So how am I supposed to help them as a coach? You
Mm-hmm.
kind of can't, which is why these coaches will put out their spreadsheets. A lot of them have been promoting their 2024 updated Google Sheet. And
Right.
those are fine. But from a user perspective, like, okay, a Google spreadsheet is not great. It can be kind of confusing. You've got to manually upload all of your transactions. There's a lot of things that are very limiting.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing, our software is called Tandem because we're doing it in tandem with coaches, is we said, hey, we've got the software for users to track all their finances, create budgets, create their plans, track everything over time. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, like, say, Justin, you are a money coach and your business was Justin teaches money, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You'd say, okay, you can use our platform. We'll set it up for you in a day's time. It's going to be justincoachesmoney.com backslash whatever tandem or backslash money tracker.
Mm-hmm.
So we can set it up for your domain. You'd have all of your branding, all of your logos, everything on there. And then your users could actually sign up. And now they've got access to this budgeting and tracking platform that is going to be vastly superior to Google Sheets. but
Mm-hmm.
also all of your philosophies, like you're able to customize and set up your software with that in place. Coaches can use them as a lead magnet. They can get people to sign up and pay for the full model.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we're doing in an effort to make it like an offer that you couldn't say no to is we're telling coaches like, hey, we're not going to charge you anything. We're just going to split the revenue 50-50 that your users pay for. So additional revenue source should be a better experience when you actually go in and want to help your clients. You can see all their finances and all of their goals, their vision, so long as they give you permission to view those things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's going to be a big objective for 2024 moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So did you code that, or you are working
No,
with
I can't
other
code anything,
coders?
man. I don't even know HTML. But this idea came about in 2020, actually. Um, I think around summer of 2020, so 3.5 years ago. In college, I started a money coaching business. It was my first business that I started. I mean, I had a little bit of success because a college student, when you make more than $1,000 with a business, you're like, all
That's
right.
success.
Yeah. But I became super frustrated with the whole spreadsheet game because I was playing that game. I was like, this is terrible, but how am I supposed to tell these people what they should do if I can't like interact and engage with their setup?
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked one of my best buddies in college who was going into, I don't know if it's computer science, but in my mind, like he was coding, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, can you build me something super simple where they can just create, like I can tell them, like, hey, this is a financial position, and hey, this is a cash flow, and they could just fill it out and we could both see it on some platform. And then that turned into um, us trying to figure it out for a few years before finally deciding like, hey, rather than me creating software for my own coaching business, like I want to focus on real estate, but what if we just collaborate and say, hey, like coaches, you don't need to create these spreadsheets anymore. You don't need to manage them. We can build you a software and we can both win with it.
Yeah.
So we made that pivot this last spring. And so we're creeping up on like 9 months from that pivot to actually have our minimum viable product out to market.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's cool. That was the primary reason I was at FinCon, was to gauge interest on that and get some demos set up, and those have all gone well. So
Okay.
mhm.
Good. 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 So it sounds like that's the new thing for you.
Yeah, that and yeah, I'm considering getting out of wholesaling and doing hard money lending. So like writing the loans that people use to flip.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at with
Yeah. Yeah.
my stuff. So
Yeah. That may end up with you taking over some properties projects and
dude,
that kind of thing.
I hope not. I hope not.
just just
That's not a
just
win for anybody.
yeah, just be aware that it can go there.
Yeah, well, if you underwrite it the right way, it'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then usually as a hard money lender, you're not underwriting the whole deal, just a portion.
Yeah, so typically it's a percentage of the loan to cost, right? So if it costs someone 100K, you might say like, oh, I'll fund 90 of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then some percentage of the reno, and that depends on their experience, what the reno
Mm-hmm.
budget is, how much we think the house is worth, everything like that. But the way I would do it is like I'd go and be a loan officer for a national company, which it's kind of an interesting business, but they'll actually sell the note off shortly after
Mm-hmm.
they loan the money. So they don't really hold on to a lot of the risk themselves. The
Gotcha.
institutional money does. And truthfully, I don't know how the that foreclosure process would look if somebody did the flip and couldn't sell it and couldn't refinance it. I don't know who it is that takes the property back.
Because you'd, as a hard money lender, if you're only financing a portion of it, you'd be in second, possibly third
No,
position.
only first position. The flipper comes in and like for instance, the house that I bought, we bought for 215,000,
Uh-huh.
and just to get into the deal, we had to come up with $42,000 cash.
Mm-hmm.
And that ignores like any of the money. You have to front all the reno. And we only, because our reno budget went up, we only got funded like something around 60, something in the 60% for the amount of reno they actually give us. So you have like a good amount of cash into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like with these notes, you can't get
So
anything
you didn't
else.
have it, so there was no other lender involved in your. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
we
you and the hard money lender.
yep, exactly. Yep. And that's if they don't do it that way, then they'd have a hard time reselling the note in the secondary market
Gotcha.
because
Gotcha.
nobody's going to want to deal with that. So, like, if we needed to bring on capital for like renovation or something like that, then we'd have to say, like, hey, does anyone want to provide unsecured debt? You can do a personal guarantee, you can do some other things,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't secure anything on that real estate.
Right. Right. Okay. So my last question for you.
Yeah.
This mobile home park job that you took with this company that's got the celebrity status behind it and all of that, did that did that provide the networking opportunity you thought it might um while you were there?
Hmm. That's an interesting question because it did give me access to some of these people who had bigger names. And I would
Mm-hmm.
say if I had decided that what I wanted to do was like stick with those guys and grow up through their company, it would have been a great opportunity. Like if I would have just stuck it out and um I mean, I've talked to people recently about that deal and I left um spring of 2022 is when I left that job. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been 2 years and it's worse of a dumpster fire than when I was there. But if I had wanted to like get into their world, I could have stuck that out and I'm sure like they were growing fast enough. I'm sure I could have gotten into some like virtual management job, but I can also tell you that was not a company or culture I wanted anything to do with at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if I had wanted it, the networking benefits were there, but I saw really quickly that what people post about on their Instagram and their podcasts about like this guy was really big on like, oh, my business is a well-oiled machine, and oh, we don't have the issues other companies have because we thought it all
Mm-hmm.
out. And we use traction. Everything is run by traction. And then you get into it and you're like, bro, I don't know what this is, but it is not traction and it is not a well-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a train caught on fire, is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, the marketing hype seldom lives up to the reality on the ground.
Yeah, overpromise and underdeliver, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Jared. It's been good having this conversation. I appreciate the time.
All right, kick off season
Yeah.
two strong. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Jared. You have a great day.
Hey, you too, Justin.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye. These interviews always leave me with plenty of new lessons. As with any rental situation, don't just look at the mobile home itself, but also the quality of the neighbors. Anyone living there would have to have gone through the same screening process you did, so pay attention and see if they're really screening the people they let move in. If you rent to own, be sure that the mobile home you purchase is capable of being moved easily. This is the best way to keep your options open if your current mobile home park no longer works for you. Research the mobile home park's current relationship with the city or county. The more poorly a mobile home park is run, the more likely it will have a less than sterling relationship with local government. This can hinder you if you need to obtain any permits for your mobile home. Renting to own a mobile home could be a viable path to affordability, but keep in mind that your mobile home will always need a piece of land to sit on. Keeping your mobile home lot clean can go a long way to helping you negotiate lower rent. Thanks for watching Renter Confidential. Happy apartment hunting. And remember, when it comes to renting, insider information is the best roommate you can ever have.